Los Yoma!
On the last two episodes, we've covered A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. Tonight, we're covering the third of the original Star Wars trilogy, Return of the Jedi. Released in 1983 and directed by Richard Marquand. Written by George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan, who between Empire and Return of the Jedi had worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark together, and produced by Howard Kazanesian, who had produced Raiders. The third and final film of the original trilogy stars once again Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, Billy D. Williams as Lando, Peter Mayhew, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, Frank Oz, David Prowse and James Earl Jones as Vader, and Sebastian Shaw as the unmasked Vader, Ian D. McDiarmid as the Emperor, who would go on to play the younger Emperor Palpatine.
Luke gets his hand cut off, finds out Vader's his father, hand gets frozen, taken away by Boba Fett. It ends on such a down note. I mean, that's what life is, a series of down endings.
When Empire left off, Han had been frozen in carbonite and taken to Jabba the Hutt. But the rest of the gang, Luke now missing a hand, Leia, Lando, and Chewie, were in the Millennium Falcon. As Vader kept up the search for his son, who had escaped again, and Luke must go back to Yoda to complete his training.
Unfortunate that you rushed to face him. That incomplete was your training. That not ready for the burden were you.
One of the big questions in making this film was whether Han Solo would return, which is a bit of an irony since we talked about last week, Han is always trying to leave in these movies, and Harrison Ford was always trying to get out of his contract at the end of it. Richard Marquand, who directed the film, and Harrison Ford wanted Han Solo to die. George Lucas and Kasdan couldn't decide exactly what they wanted to happen. In one version, the movie ends with the rebellion basically destroyed, Leia struggling with her duties, Luke wandering off, a more downcast ending. Luke would have been like Clint Eastwood, Kasdan said, embittered and alone, like in a spaghetti western. Another ending, never written, has Luke putting on Vader's mask and becoming a Sith like his father. However, these ideas were scrapped as it would make Star Wars not a suitable family franchise. And it's been speculated end the sales of the toys that were very popular by this point. Another pro-family change, George Lucas wasn't sure if he wanted Yoda to return, but after talking to a child psychologist, realized children might think Vader lied about being Luke's father if Yoda didn't confirm it. Another change that Kasdan and Lucas discussed is that Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Yoda would come back from the spirit world and join in the Ewok party instead of being one with the Force as ghosts. The Ewoks were chosen as new characters rather than how George Lucas originally envisioned them, a planet of Wookiees.
By the time I actually came to shoot Jedi, I knew Star Wars and Empire backwards and forwards. I knew them extremely well. And I liked the apparent naivete and simplicity with which George had made Star Wars. I liked that style very much.
Richard Marquand was not the original choice for director. George Lucas wanted David Lynch, who had just directed The Elephant Man, or David Cronenberg, who said he liked directing only his own scripts. Since Marquand, a Welsh director, had not worked much with special effects, George Lucas hung around set quite a bit as a quietly supervising presence. It's a liaison between Industrial Light and Magic and Marquand, which Marquand called trying to direct King Lear while Shakespeare watched. And it's a pretty incredible use of Industrial Light and Magic's powers, with the longest battle scenes in the original trilogy. Yet Marquand and the crew managed to film it faster than Empire by 6 weeks and kept to a very tight schedule, at this time a tight budget of $32.5 million. Part of the budget saving was that Lucas used Industrial Light and Magic rather than someone else's special effects company.
In the first film, we had maybe 20 colors to paint with, and this time we've had 40 colors to paint with. Well, it doesn't mean it's going to be a better painting. Special effects are just a tool, a means of telling a story. People have a tendency to confuse them as an end to themselves. A special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing.
They used Death Valley for a lot of their pickup shots and would spring into action for 20 hours a day, 6 days a week to get 900 special effects shots by the end of their shoot. A lot of the non-special effects shooting was done at Elstree again, which thankfully had not burned down in a second fire. Marquand compared his relationship with George Lucas to an orchestra conductor and a composer. One interesting thing about filming was that Richard Marquand would mostly use Steadicam and stationary static cameras rather than moving the camera with the action. The Steadicam shots occur when Leia and Luke are riding together on the speeder.
Keep on that one. I'll take these two.
A lot of movies now tend to really move the camera a lot. Marquand felt like even at the time, tracking shots and crane shots lead to the camera being moved way too much. George Lucas said he chose Richard Marquand for how he worked with actors. However, he would clash with Anthony Daniels, who he said did not feel like acting as a robot. Industrial Light and Magic did reject 100,000 feet of film with film perforations, which delayed things a bit.
So we developed a whole new way of putting together a sound room in a theater with different kind of baffling, with different kind of crossover systems. Tom Holman, who was in charge of the project, developed a whole different way of looking at the sound in a theater. And so when we finished that theater, we had people from the sound studios in Los Angeles come up and we showed it off, and they all said, well, we want one like this. So then we started building sound theaters for everybody in Los Angeles, and then we came to the conclusion that wouldn't it be great if we could get theaters in that the public goes and sees a movie and to sound this good.
After the production shoot during screenings, George Lucas was dismayed to find out he couldn't really hear the special effects mix, which led to Lucas founding THX, the cinema audio company that would act as a quality assurance system at all theaters who wanted to play one of George Lucas's movies.